White Rock and South Surrey has seen a tremendous increase in the number of trains, with an increasing number of rail cars per train and load weight through our communities over the last few years. The upgrades to the Serpentine Trestle are an indication that this trend will continue. The increase in train traffic contributes to concerns over noise, vibration, health and community, and the beach access. And here's the question: what changes at the federal level would you implement to mitigate the impact of increasing rail traffic on our community, both in the short and long term?
At the time of the English Bay oil spill, I remarked that we face the same kinds of threat all along the BC coast, whether here in South Surrey, White Rock, where new shoreline U.S. coal train traffic poses an alarming threat to the coastline itself, to wildlife, and to our community, or in Kitimat's Deep Fjord, where a dilbit spill from Northern Gateway would be even more devastating than bunker or light crew that floats. Dilbit would coat the seafloor for generations. Thermal coal trains from the U.S. Midwest travel around the Semiahmoo Peninsula and Boundary Bay by the sea in a sensitive coastline ecosystem, along shoreline cliffs on a rail line planned a century ago rather than for today's heavy rail traffic. Is the cliff geology vulnerable to the cliff slips and possible derailments into the sea? This is just one of many important questions. We know that an increasing number of trains travel along the White Rock waterfront. They are long, loud, and disruptive, and when they travel to Crescent Beach, they already cut off the community from fire, ambulance, and police, where response time can be critical. The more trains, the greater the risk. A federal contribution to relieving these situations before a tragedy happens needs to happen cooperatively now and not years from now. Access to Crescent Beach, especially for emergency services, should be an immediate priority. Long-term consideration of relocating the rail line needs to begin now to establish it as viable. That raises questions of competing economic interests and of public safety, mainly from the benefit of for a foreign-owned railway and mining interests and overseas coal consumers with comparatively marginal benefit to Canada. Tonight's organizers, including Paula Williams of Community and Coal and others, have called for a comprehensive health impact assessment for an independent third party concerning the Burlington Northern Rail line along the peninsula. Coal dust is likely the least of our concerns and may be popular, but an exaggerated concern. But without a comprehensive health impact assessment, an environmental assessment measure in the future may be too late and too little. More than that, the Burnaby coal train derailment in 2014 underscores the need to ensure communities are aware of what dangerous materials are moved by rail through them. Emergency responders need to know what they are confronting to respond appropriately. The Burnaby derailment was triggered by a beaver dam. In the peninsula, we have the additional risk of landslips and falling trees and cliffs into the sea.
Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity to speak about coal trains, rail routes, and rail safety. I believe that these related risks and railway-related risks and safety are among the top community concerns, if not the top concern, as Daphne stated. Right now, area residents are seriously concerned about increasingly large quantities of American thermal coal passing along the waterfront through our communities on their way to Surrey-Fraser docks. Washington state ports are not able or willing to handle it themselves, and this is Montana and Wyoming thermal coal exports. American coal giants are looking north to Canada to solve their problems, and specifically to use Fraser-Surrey docks as their shipping port. Now is not the time to convert Fraser-Surrey docks into a bulk commodity port, a port use inconsistent with protecting the ecology of the Fraser River. Fraser-Surrey Docks needs to find its niche among Port Metro Vancouver facilities, and the newly opened inland rail terminal near Ashcroft may provide many opportunities to help Fraser-Surrey Docks find its niche without turning itself into a bulk commodity port. If I am elected your MP, I will forcefully advocate with caucus and government to safeguard our communities from the risks associated with transporting coal through the communities. I will champion against policy approvals and against using federal funds to support conversion of Fraser Surrey docks to a bulk commodity port. I believe that in the long term, railway relocation provides the ultimate safeguards.
The vast majority of the trains that are passing through the Semiahmoo Peninsula are indeed BNSF trains carrying dirty U.S. thermal coal. I live in Crescent Beach. I see as many as 20 to 22 of these trains going by in a 24-hour period. We've got to ask ourselves a simple question. Why is the U.S. not allowing the shipment of their own dirty thermal coal through their own ports in Washington and Oregon? Well, I'll tell you why. The Americans don't want to have their ports shipping dirty thermal coal for environmental, health, and economic reasons. These are the same reasons that should matter to people living here, right? We have the same rights to a clean environment, good health, and a strong and sustainable economy as our American neighbors do. We have the same rights. We need to keep dirty U.S. coal out of Canadian ports. And if we did, the rail traffic would go down by a whole lot. And this is in keeping with the NDP's plan to overall reduce greenhouse gas emissions from Canada to below the level that they were in 1990 by the year 2025 by about 34%, and then even greater to an 80% level. So ideally, the train line should be moved inland. I'm talking about a train line for the train line for freight trains that are carrying other goods like softwood lumber, grain, other types of products. And we have a problem with dangerous goods, which we're going to be discussing later. But if the train line were moved inland, it would be a whole new safety level that we would experience here. And I would work like crazy to get this through. And I'm well positioned to do that because I know the legislation involved and I have the contacts in the federal government that know how to work with me and get these things done.
I believe regulating the impact of rail traffic is not something the federal government should be in charge of. We'll give more power to the provincial and municipal governments. And we will encourage negotiation between property owners and train owners. We believe that the people should have more say. And that's how we will mitigate the impact of the concerns about rail traffic in the community. Thank you.
As you know, the BNSF, the line is used to transport more and more lethally hazardous materials along an increasingly unstable coastline, where mudslides often occur. The continued development at the top of those slopes is changing the drainage along those areas, and they become more and more dangerous as time passes. Much of that route is inaccessible for emergency response or for adequate remediation should there be a disaster. So until the tracks are relocated, that really is should be our first priority. The most urgent need in the short term is to set up the best emergency response plan we can under the circumstances, starting with insisting that BNSF inform our fire departments and other first responders in advance what hazardous goods are being shipped and when. I think that's just very basic. So that's the short term. In the long term, what Canada needs is a national transportation strategy. Canada is the only country in the OECD that does not have one. And since, like in the last election, the Green Party this time around is the only party offering a national transportation strategy that would protect our community. The Green Party will influence Parliament to create a clean freight initiative that includes science-based assessment of risks and hazards, new regulations such as mandatory positive train control systems, and financial incentives to spend less money on highways and more on rebuilding the national dream of a railway that serves all Canadians. The average cost per kilometer of new railway lines is 7 times less than building new highways. It would also help us get all those nasty trucks off the road. One train actually can pull as much as 280 trucks. Plus trains are 3 times more fuel efficient and emit less greenhouse gases. So there is a real need to bring back the old national dream of a railway that unites Canada. I could talk about the passenger rail side of the policy as well, but the point is that the Green Party actually has a national policy that's written down and explained clearly online at greenparty.ca.
Thank you, Larry.